All right, Rob, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, happy to. Very, very glad that I got into the world of sports and entertainment. I'm currently the director of operations for Spectrum Center, where the Hornets play. And I've had a very unique and chaotic road to get where I was. I started my first restaurant when I was 24 years old. So that's more of like a cautionary tale than it is to sound braggadocious at all. Because had I known what I know now, I probably would have started a little bit later. But then I started three more restaurants and ran those for over the course of about 9 years for all of them, 14 years as an entrepreneur total. And during the pandemic, I was getting ready to launch multiple locations of a quick service healthy eating concept that I had in Champaign. And unfortunately, COVID hit the brakes on that really quickly. So I starting to look at like, what could I do? When is this going to be over? How do I get back into like food and hospitality? And then I saw this sports and entertainment director operations. And I was like, this sounds like it could be very, very cool. And it honestly is. Like, it's controlling chaos, but I love that I'm in all forms of hospitality. We feed players and teams. We feed people out of the concession stands. We feed people in clubs and in suites. We feed the workers that are in the building. And I love that just because hospitality is where I live and breathe. There's no better way to get to know people than breaking bread. There's nothing that's like more of like a sincere form of like care and flattery that you can give to somebody than to be willing to cook for them and have a servant's heart to be able to make sure they have a good time. So that's all the stuff that I love. I love taking care of guests, taking care of people, taking care of coaches. I think it's a very blessed career to have. So I've enjoyed it immensely. And even though I had a very twisted road to get here, I love where I am.
Man, that's awesome. And I'm sorry to hear about the COVID, like champagne idea that you had. I'm sure we can chat about that as well. I think I'd love to hear about that sometime. And then I guess I'm also sorry to hear about the Charlotte Hornets, but that's the
They're doing better. They're doing better.
Yeah, I mean, they won yesterday. They beat the Nets yesterday, which I don't know what that says about the Nets, but but yeah. So I guess, it sounds like an amazing opportunity that you're in now, and the operation itself sounds gigantic. It sounds huge. Like, it sounds like I guess my question to you, because it's like I'm actually fascinated about diving into questions that I don't normally ask as well, but I guess like, given the size, it seems like the magnitude of the role in of itself, like what are you think are like your three biggest roadblocks there to making it a success?
Right. And I think that's one of the things that won't surprise anybody is staffing. And it's not just trying to make an atmosphere where we can have like people who are hourlies, but also people who are salaried, people that we want to have them build a career. That's one of the hardest parts. And I think from that, it's there's a big gap right now between how things used to be. Like, even when I was younger, you could go work for a small business, a restaurant, or even a big company, and they had some really dedicated time periods for onboarding, for training, for being able to have somebody that you could shadow and partner with. And I think over the course of the past 20 years, it's gotten to a point where that has narrowed so much that now most people that get into jobs like this and a lot of other jobs just feel like they're being thrown in. And so it's hard to get people to want to come in that want to stick. And that's where what I try to do as best I can for staffing is make sure that I welcome people, try to build a culture with them, take them out to lunch, ask them where they want to be in 3 years and in 5 years. So they can try to feel bought in. Because otherwise, you're just going to have people come and go. They're going to find something that's better, that works with their schedule, that they can make more money, as they should. They should be looking out for themselves and doing what's better. But I think it's my job as a leader to try to cultivate a culture that they want to stay in. So I'm training them to be good enough to leave, but they like being with me enough that they don't want to go anywhere. That's really what I look for. And that's definitely the number one thing is staffing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, in the sense that what I definitely think is no longer interesting is what I hear as a total norm is that staffing is number one. But it's interesting as well, you break it down into the kinds of people that you're looking for as well. And I guess that seems to be the next bigger problem that most people have, which is quality. As in, we can finding people, you can put bodies in there, and we know that they'll do a job on some level. But like, well, you're really looking for is quality, and those people, like you said, where do you want to be in 3 years' time? Because to find that kind of a person to have that kind of a chat with means you're already in mind looking for that person. And
Right.
so I guess like, do you have any sort of like formal like approach to finding that, or do you have like is it one of these kind of it's hard to describe, but you know when you see it kind of things?
Yeah, I think it's actually easier to describe than even I might have anticipated when I really think it through. One of the big things that I do is any single time I come across somebody who is pleasant, good at their job, smiling at work, seems like they just are genuinely trying to have a better day than what's happening to them, I immediately say, hey, can I talk to you for a few minutes? I see that like you're working at Taco Bell right now. Are you happy here? Do you feel like you have a career here? If you do, great. If not, I'd love to talk to you. Because a lot of my staff are people that I just found because they were pleasant people. And I think what's happening right now is we have a lot of really, really good qualified people, but they've never gotten to really have a leader. They've never gotten to have a mentor. They've never gotten to be in a culture that allows them to like learn instead of just trial by fire. So that's what I'm trying really hard to do is I think that there's a misnomer that people say it's harder to find skilled labor. It's harder to find people skilled already, but there's tons of people that have it in them. And we just have to find better ways as businesses to be able to have a better onboarding program where they feel like they're getting developed and that they're part of something instead of just a, hey, hit that clock, go over there, take those orders, and then when you're done, leave. I really try to make sure that people feel like there's more to it and that they understand why what they're doing is important.
It's interesting you say that. Yesterday I had on a woman, and she runs the leadership development training at Chick-fil-A in Georgia, and she was telling me that like to that point, you know, like not all leaders, you know, like all candidates, people in the company, like have the same opportunities to progress because of like the systems or frameworks or the traditions that exist kind of put a ceiling on people. And she was saying like, you know, for example, Chick-fil-A, they have now removed like a sort of a college degree as a criteria for somebody to like even own one. And it's like, okay, great, because obviously like there are great people in this industry. Not everybody goes to college to get that. It's like, I guess you can't put a cap on that. And I think for you, like, it's very interesting hearing you talk about this because your sort of ideology almost in and of itself is like a retention strategy as much as it is even just finding the people to come in and be that in the first place. And I guess so the way you're talking, does that also like how you lean into like sort of retaining the staff you have? Because given how hard it is to find, like you said, the number one problem is staffing, I presume retention is like very top of mind for you.
Right, absolutely. And I think it comes from being sincere in the things that you try to do to make people feel important. You could buy people a pizza party because they've been really overworked and unappreciated, and you're reacting to that by having a pizza party. Or you can showcase that because you know that people are going to have an earlier day, that you send out a message to your whole team like, hey, I'm getting Starbucks for everybody. What does everybody want? Instead of it feeling like it's a reactive thing to heal things that have gone wrong, you just build a culture where you're always being proactive about making sure people feel appreciated. So that's what I try to do. Like one of my big things that I do is in this building, our chefs cook family meal for everybody every day. And I love that we call it family meal, and I love that they do that. But what I do above and beyond that is at least like once a week or at least a few times a month, I'll just say, chefs, you're off today. I'm cooking family meal. I want you guys to not have to worry about cooking for everybody. I'm going to cook for you guys and everybody else. So that way, again, it's sincerity. It's are you doing this proactively because you want people to feel valued and appreciated, or are you doing it reactively because you're just trying to hope they don't mutiny, and so you're buying them pizza real quick? So that's where it's like it's got to be something that's intentional and sincere.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's actually amazing. I mean, it's funny to think about it in that way because it's like, I guess you have such a large workforce that like you probably have to be very cognizant of being proactive in this case. You know, like, you know, I guess if there's so many people, you got to keep so many people like at a kind of good happiness level. And that is such a, like, there's so many plates and there's so many different things. And the way you describe it as like family, because I think about that a lot in the sense that like, you're having a family meal, but you also got to treat it like a family. There's so many different personalities within a family, and like in the workplace, that you have to like juggle all of those and keep the show on the
Right.
road.
Right.
And I guess, on the topic of families, we have different generations in families, and we have different ages in families. What is your take on, like, say, the workforce as a whole, like Gen Z, millennial, X, boomer, and how they're all kind of in one place now,
Right.
and
Yeah, I think
especially the
that's
Gen.
Yeah, I think that's super important. I've noticed that a lot of people are dealing with that, and I've found like the best and easiest way is that you can treat people differently and still treat people fairly. What motivates every person is going to be different. What annoys and frustrates people is going to be different. So what I try to do is, like, even if I'm getting 2 to 3 minutes with each person, I want to go by their stand, their club, their suite, and I just want to give them like a fist bump, a hug, whatever the case may be, and just be like, hey, like, how's life going? Give me the 1 minute of how's your life going. And then I always try to remember those things about, like, asking how their son is doing. Did their daughter make it to college? Like, is their family going to move here to meet them? I try to remember those things because those matter to some people, no matter which generation they're in. Other people, all they want to know is, what do I got to do to make a little bit more money? So those are the people that I say, hey, like, you're doing really good. Here's the opportunities that you need. If you can do A, B, and C for me, I will make sure that the moment I can give you another raise, I'll give you another raise. And I think that's where we need to start looking at when we're dealing with people. Don't be afraid to treat them differently as long as you're being fair, because they're going to have things that motivate them and things that demotivate them. So you can't just blanket statement across Gen Zs, boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, and say, well, I want all of you to be happy because we're going to start adding in a free lunch every day. Some people might really care about that. Some people might not make it here in time to even eat it. So you just have to be able to be cognizant of what's going to motivate people and what's going to make them feel like they're part of a team, because everyone will have a different answer. I know I always show my age, but you have to be like Phil Jackson. He always said he managed every single player that he had completely differently because he knew what motivated some people didn't motivate others. And that's what I try to do.
What's amazing about you using that sports reference was, I was sitting here going, you're sitting in the Charlotte Hornets, and all I hear is sports coach of, like, you can't blanket roar at the team at halftime. Certain players get motivated by screams, certain get motivated by armor on the shoulder. Like, everyone gets kind of motivated in a different way. And I can hear that say that. So it's funny you mentioned Phil Jackson. It also doesn't show your age. It just,
I don't know. Maybe
I mean, they're making documentaries about the Last Dance now. So I guess we're all aged out now. But I guess then, like, when you think about, like, there's such a broad job market now. Like, I was chatting with somebody recently, and they were talking about how they hire as many, like, sort of retirees as they do Gen Z, which I thought was quite interesting, in the sense I was like, I never think of it that way, but it's like, you think of, like, new to the workforce, you think Gen Z, or like kids kind of coming in high school, where there are people like retiring, and it's a fun kind of social job for retirees as well. And so I'm curious your take on, like, sort of the job market and hospitality as a whole. Like, what's your take?
Gotcha. I think for me, like, job market as a whole is that I love that food touches so many different things, because hospitality can really, like, lend itself into everything. It can be marketing, it can be payroll, it can be inventory control, it can be ordering, it can be menu design, it can be cooking food, serving food, it can be cocktails, beverages, it can be ice sculptures and activations and action stations. So I love that, because there's people that come in and work as an hourly here that they realize, man, the more and more I was working in the kitchen, I realized I would love to do kitchen design. And then they start to go on a whole other walk of life because they came into hospitality. And I think that's what's really cool about what I like the most about it, is that it has so much diversity in what's available to people from a job perspective, but it also has a ton of diversity for a people perspective. And that's another aspect that I love. That is, you can walk into one of my kitchens, and there's someone that is an immigrant from the Dominican Republic. There's someone that's from New York, that born and raised their whole life, and they finally wanted to move out of the big city. You have
Yeah.
every kind of different race, gender, every kind of sexual preference, everything. And those things are more important than people realize, because that diversity in background is something that can really help you tell a story in hospitality. And we have menus that are built by people that it's like, hey, this was something that's from their hometown, that they grew up in Puerto Rico and it's a popular dish there. So their soul is into it. They care about it. Like, we have some things that are dishes that are made from people because they grew up in a single mother household and they had to start cooking for themselves at 12 years old. So they taught themselves how to cook these things. And I think that's what makes great food even better, because there's a backstory. There's things that have happened to that person's life as an experience that made them choose how they did that dish. So I just love that gambit of hospitality, diversity of what kind of job you want to get into. Hospitality touches it. Diversity of getting to learn and experience things from other people. It's a plethora. There's a never ending amount of people you can get to know.
And so I guess, like, you know, on that, like, where there's a plethora of just like, and I love the word plethora, by the way, it's just a great word. Like, when I think about that, like, I mean, you know, we've come out of COVID, and it seems like the whole industry's kind of changed as well. And I guess, you know, like, your plethora of people, a plethora of voices, and now there's all these, like, I don't want to say a plethora of trends because it just sounds odd, but you know what I mean? There's so many new trends. Like, what do you see in, like, the workforce that comes into you that just seems so different in a post and pre-COVID world?
I think there's actually more positives than negatives that came out of it, because I think now more than ever, people want to know what their future is. So before, there might be people, especially in hospitality, that they almost feel like they have to do it out of default. They were like, well, I needed to help my family when I was younger, so I started to wait tables. Or I need to be able to try to figure out a way to pay for school, so I started to work in a kitchen. And, like, nothing wrong with that. It's great that people have to start even in some of those hardship ways, because now it's made them better people on what they're considering for their future, because they used to just do hospitality as a means to an end. Now hospitality does not have to be a means to an end. There is, if you look at any individual sports arena, any semi-major metropolitan area, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs where people are making 80, 90, 100, 120, $150,000 a year. So I love it when my hourly cook sits down, who, you know, I just was able to tell them that now I can pay them $18 an hour, and I love them light up. And I say, hey, I love that you're feeling this way, but let's talk about this right now. This is good for now. What do you want to do in 3 years? What do you want to do in 5 years? How can I help you get there? And I think COVID did that. COVID made people much more cognizant of, I don't want to do this position forever. I want to do hospitality forever, but I don't want to stay this position for my whole career. So it made them much more, like, ambitious to try to learn. They got better at being self-aware for talking to their leaders about, I want to try this. I want to get introduced to that. I need to be able, what do I need to do? If I want to be an executive chef, how do I do that in 5 years? Opening that conversation, because COVID wanted people to, it made people think about their future more. That put people in a better spot, because now leaders and employees alike have a much better way to get them elevated in their career, which is good for everyone.
It's awesome.
I love it.
No, and I think I was just going to say, I was like, like, I mean, it's funny because I've heard that from a few people now as well, that, like, you know, the era of, like, Kitchen Confidential, Anthony Bourdain, kind of crazy kitchens and all that kind of stuff is kind of, like, almost, like, behind us now. And I think, like, you know, there's this sort of boomerang effect of people coming back into hospitality after leaving from COVID, because they realize that there's, like, a love of, like, being in hospitality. And I can hear it from you, and I can hear it the way you talk about it. It's like, you know, being able to sit down with somebody and say, like, in 3 years' time, like, you're not going to be this kind of chef. You know, your love for hospitality is such as, like, where do you see yourself going? There's a really great article. I actually give it to all the hires here when we bring people into Landed, which is called Giving Away Your Legos. And an old boss of mine, she was very early Facebook and early in a bunch of these different tech companies, you know, and, like, when you're progressing in an organization, you know, like, and as an organization grows, like, you feel like you should hold on to your job spec for as long as you can hold on to your job spec. And it's like, no, like, you got to be comfortable. Like, a child wants to hold on to their Legos. You know,
Right.
it's like, no, like, what's your comfortability at giving away your Legos because you're needed for something more? Your expertise or your experience is more valuable elsewhere. You want to launch a new restaurant somewhere else, like, you've never launched a restaurant, and it's like, we trust you to go do it, you know, and it's like being able to give away your things. So it's interesting to hear you say that, because I've only heard some people say it, but I've never heard anybody articulate it as well as you.